Hi, I'm Joe Salzone, and welcome to a special conversation with the new Sheriff of Cayuga County, Brian Schenck. Sheriff, it's good to talk to you.
Good to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
A lot of people might not know that you've been a member of the Sheriff's Department for a while.
I have been for just over 21 years, and I love the job that I do. I've loved every minute of it.
What do you identify as, say, the top three issues facing Cayuga County?
I think today, currently, the no, absolute number one issue, in my opinion, is our drug and heroin epidemic that we have. We've seen just so many lives lost to this issue, so many families devastated, so many crimes committed because of this problem. So that is on the top of my list as far as the number one concern. I'm also concerned with ongoing domestic abuse that we see, the number of incidents that we handle along with our partner agencies in Cayuga County. It's steadily increasing each year. And with that, along with sexual abuse, especially child sexual abuse, I think that those are top priorities and top concerns for us. And I'd have to say for number three, traffic safety. I think that traffic safety is a concern, driving while intoxicated, drug driving, and people texting and road rage and that type of thing. I think we've got some issues with traffic safety that certainly need to be addressed and would be a concern as well.
Let's talk about that opioid epidemic. A couple years ago, it was seemingly in the headlines every day. I don't seem to hear about it as much anymore. Is that a sign that law enforcement in the county has a better control over it, or have we just become desensitized to it?
I think a little bit of both. I think that unfortunately it's not in the headlines because it's not so new now. It's kind of the new norm. We are still seeing a number of opiate overdose deaths that we're investigating and people overdosing on opiates. However, we are seeing some people shift from opiates to different drugs now that maybe I don't want to say necessarily safer, but you're not seeing people overdose and die on those drugs. So I think it's a little bit of both, but we do still have the problem there. It is still an epidemic in our community, but it's the new norm. People aren't paying as much attention to it anymore because we've been living with this situation for a while now, unfortunately.
What is it about opioids, about heroin, that has been and is so rampant around here?
I think the fact that it's just so addictive and it's so hard for people that are struggling with addiction when it comes to opiates to get clean, to get off of them and to move on. It takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of help, takes a lot of will by the person that's suffering to get to recovery. And I believe it's the most evil drug out there. It's the worst drug I've ever seen during the course of my career. But it's just so hard for people to stop. It's just so addictive. And once people become addicted to the opiates, it's just so hard for them to quit.
I know a few years ago the Sheriff's Department introduced these drop off bins where if you have old medication, prescription pills in your cabinet, you can drop them off at the sheriff's office, no questions asked. Has that helped curb some of these numbers and the threat posed by opioids?
I believe that it has. It's hard to measure our success with that, but I can tell you that we are regularly emptying that bin with full garbage bags of prescription pills, including opiate painkillers, and destroying those. People are using that bin. I know there are multiple bins placed throughout the county. The Auburn Police Department also has a bin. I know that they are regularly removing prescription pills from those bins. If we can take those pills out of medicine cabinets and out of people's homes when they're not being used and not needed, we can ensure that they aren't getting into the wrong hands. And unfortunately, a lot of people that become addicted to opiates started with prescription pills. So if we have those pills getting into the wrong hands, they could potentially be the person taking those could be potentially become addicted to those in the future. So I think any prescription pills that aren't needed or unneeded should wind up in the bin at our office or the Auburn Police Department or certain pharmacies that might have those bins because we want to keep them out of the wrong hands. So I would encourage people to continue to destroy those pills if they don't need them in that manner.
And we're talking about pills that are prescribed because you've had a dental procedure, because you've had some kind of surgery. not through any illicit means, but an honest to God prescription.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, a number of people that I've dealt with through the course of my career that have become addicted to opiates have become addicted to heroin and opiates for just that reason. They were prescribed a prescription for some type of procedure. They started to use that prescription and unfortunately became hooked on them. So that is a common theme.
Are we talking also about painkillers?
We are prescription painkillers.
So we're talking a real broad spectrum of different drugs that are readily available, that are easily prescribed and easily obtained. What do you do about that? How can you fight against that?
I think that we're making some headway. I think doctors are doing a much better job today, not prescribing more medication that is actually needed. Or in some cases, I think they're doing a much better job of not trying to mask all of the pain. I think that there was the perception in the past that a doctor has to mask all of the pain when we have some type of procedure, whether it's a tooth pulled or something that requires pain medication. And I think we need to be really aware of just how dangerous these painkillers can be. So I think doctors are doing a better job now of realizing that, I might not be able to mask all of the pain. I can't prescribe them so many pills that they potentially could become addicted to these pills. And I think they're doing a better job with that. And hopefully we continue in the medical field to realize that just how dangerous these prescriptions can be, even though they're prescribed with good intent.
I've had conversations with members of law enforcement over the years, and they all say the same thing, that heroin specifically is cheap to produce, it's cheap to buy. If you're talking about a drug that's incredibly inexpensive to get and you know where to get it from, you can't legislate pharmacists, you can't ban certain things from being sold. So what do you do about it?
I think that I look at our drug issue and our opiate epidemic as being solved with three core ways. I think first we need to continue to aggressively pursue drug dealers that are out there peddling their poison in our community, that being heroin and other drugs. I think we need to aggressively look to identify them, arrest them, keep them locked up just as long as we can. Second, I think prevention and awareness is a key strategy that we in law enforcement need to work with our community stakeholders to bring this information to the residents in our community, just how dangerous opiate addiction can be. When I talk about prevention and awareness, I think we need to not only educate our children, but we need to educate everybody in our community as far as how dangerous it can be to take a prescription medication, how dangerous it can be to try any type of drug. Maybe you're under peer pressure, or maybe you want to be part of the gang, and you try a drug and you become addicted. I think we need to work on prevention and awareness. I think that's a key strategy in fighting this epidemic. And third, I think that we need to support recovery efforts. I know many people who are in our community. They are just incredible people that I have a great deal of respect for, who have been addicted to opiates. They still are addicted to opiates, but they're able to lead a life of recovery because they've learned how to lead a life without using those drugs. But I know that every day can be a struggle for them. But I believe that we as a community and we in law enforcement need to support those recovery efforts and help them lead a sober and clean life, crime-free life, drug-free life. So we need to support those efforts too. So as far as dealing with our drug problem and our opiate epidemic, I see those as the three key areas that our entire community, as well as us in law enforcement, I think that we need to support those initiatives.
You've been sheriff with the department for over 20 years. How has the opioid epidemic specifically, and maybe the drug culture in a larger sense, how has it changed in the 2 decades that you've been in the sheriff's department?
I can say that with the heroin issue that we're having in recent years, it's been the most overwhelming time in regards to narcotics investigation that we've had, for a number of reasons. First of all, there are so many people dealing heroin and opiate type drugs and other drugs for that matter. It is really hard to keep up with the number of dealers that are out there. We're also seeing a number of dealers who are operating in areas like Syracuse and Rochester, and we're seeing residents from our community driving to those areas to get their drugs, and that creates a challenge for us in law enforcement here locally to deal with that, because it's hard for us to deal with the dealers in another jurisdiction, let alone deal with the ones that we have here locally. So that's been overwhelming in that aspect. I can also say that with the opiate epidemic, we've seen a number of overdose deaths in recent years. We've seen a huge increase in the number of death investigations related to drugs, and that's been somewhat overwhelming for us as well. I know that between the Auburn Police Department and the Sheriff's Department here locally, this year alone, we're up to 12 overdose deaths that we've investigated, and that doesn't include numbers from the state police here locally, which I don't have currently. So tells you we're still dealing with a lot of death investigations. 12 is a big number for a community our size that we're still seeing here in 2018. We've got that number. So those are difficult investigations. It's hard to watch the families struggle with not only the loss of a loved one, but the families that are struggling with those loved ones that are addicted and trying to help them lead a clean and sober life. So it's been very overwhelming. I'd have to say in my 21-year career that the last few years have been the most difficult when it comes to drug investigations.
Your predecessor, David Gould, longtime sheriff, very outspoken about opioids, about the epidemic. Now you're in charge. Now you're the sheriff. How will you spearhead efforts to fight this problem?
This is an area that I'm very passionate about. I'm a board member with our HEAL organization here locally, the Heroin Epidemic Action League, and I've also worked very closely with Nick's Ride, recovery house here in recovery center here in Auburn that supports recovery. I've worked very closely with Joel Campagnola and that effort. I'm also on our Drug Free Community Coalition. I'm a member. It's an area that I'm very passionate about. By being involved with those organizations, I've learned a lot about not just drug abuse, but recovery and addiction. I think that it's helped me understand the problem a lot better than I did in years past, and I think it's going to help me spearhead the efforts moving forward to not only work on law enforcement initiatives to identify and arrest drug dealers, but to help people in recovery and help support efforts to educate and bring preventive efforts to our community. So I believe that that I have a good foundation with the knowledge I've learned. I also can tell you that we have some very dedicated and talented people at the Sheriff's Office that share my vision. They share my my want to help people in our community and to see us do better, not just in law enforcement and enforcing the law, but in supporting the other initiatives that I've talked about.
You've got a couple kids.
I do.
What kind of conversations have you had with your kids about drugs?
We've always talked about different issues in law enforcement. In fact, I think my kids get sick of hearing me talk about things, but being in law enforcement and seeing what I see, we've had many talks, and sometimes they'll tell me, "All right, Dad, we get it." They don't want to talk anymore. But I'm proud to say that my daughter is actually a board member of our local drug-free community coalition here in Cayuga County. She's one of our student representatives. I'm really proud of that. So she gets it. I know my son gets it. My family gets it. So we've all taken an active role in trying to do what we can to help stop this epidemic. And they too have been very supportive and have been involved with organizations like HEAL and Nick's Ride and our Drug Free Coalition. And I'm proud of that. But they do get it.
Are you optimistic that one day this problem will become a thing of the past?
I think I've watched drug trends over the years. I think that I believe that we're at the peak of this trend when it comes to opiates and heroin. I think that we're going to see eventually, after a period of time, that we're going to start heading down on the downward slide of this problem. But unfortunately, when I think back to the past, usually when these things happen, you'll see people shift to a different kind of drug. I think heroin may not be as popular here in a few years, or we might be on a downward trend in a few years, but unfortunately, we'll be dealing with something else. It'll be another type of drug that'll be the drug of choice for that time period, at least based on my experience during my career. It's just constantly a shift from one drug to another.
How much of what law enforcement is just trying to stay on top of these really bad or troubling trends and try to get ahead of it before it becomes an issue like opioids have?
It's a constant struggle to stay ahead of these things. We're learning every day. Just when I think I've seen it all, I'm learning that I've got a lot to learn, and there are always new trends. It is a constant struggle to stay ahead. But again, I believe that's why our prevention and awareness efforts are just so important, because our kids and people in our community are always going to be exposed to some type of drug. Might not be heroin, maybe it'll be cocaine, maybe it'll be meth, maybe it'll be Molly. But there's always going to be something out there in our communities, unfortunately. So I think we need to make sure that we're doing all we can to educate the people in our community, and especially our children, as to the hazards of using these drugs and trying them, because I think we can make a huge impact by working in that area.
Anytime, Sheriff, we hear about an overdose, whether it's opioids or heroin or whatever, we hear more often than not about Narcan. What is it? Is the Sheriff's Department trained on how to use it? And is that almost like a magic bullet to combat the issue?
I wouldn't say that it's a magic bullet, but Narcan is a tool that we use to reverse the effects of an overdose. So if somebody is actively overdosing, we can administer Narcan. It's administered nasally to the person who's overdosed.
Like a nasal spray.
Like a nasal spray. We do carry that in all of our patrol cars at the sheriff's office. I know many law enforcement agencies are carrying that now, as well as first responders. If we are dispatched to an active overdose in progress, if somebody's overdosing, we can administer that nasally. I have actually done that myself. I had an overdose victim that was not far from our public safety building. I did hear the call go out on my radio one day at the public safety building. I did leave the building, and this person was on the side of the road, was a passenger in a car. He was actively overdosing. We did administer Narcan to him, and that did reverse the effects of the overdose. He did come right around in a few minutes, and were able to get him to the hospital and get him some help. But it's not a magic bullet. It does stop the receptors in the brain from taking in the drugs that are in opiates that will cause the overdose. But it's not a cure. It basically will buy some time to get that person to a medical facility to get them some help. But unfortunately, it's just a temporary fix.
Let's say the department gets a call at 12 midnight, like simple time. How much time can elapse between the department getting a phone call about an overdose and that person succumbing to that overdose? In other words, how much time do you have to actually use Narcan effectively to bring them back?
It's really hard to answer that, because a lot of it depends on exactly what type of opiate they've used, how much they've used, how long they've been a user, what type of tolerance they have to that drug. A lot of the heroin and opiate drugs that we're finding contain a very powerful painkiller called fentanyl. If there's fentanyl in that batch of heroin or opiate that they use, that might make it even more critical, and decrease the time that we have to get there and help that person. So there are a lot of factors that would control how quick we would need to get there and respond. I know a lot of family members who have family members that are struggling with opiate addiction keep Narcan in their homes, so they have it right there, and I am aware of many that have used that at home personally. I would highly recommend, if a family member is struggling with opiate addiction, that family members learn how to administer Narcan, that they keep Narcan in their home, and that they don't rely on first responders, because time would be critical, and maybe first responders can't get there quick enough.
Is there a difference in the effect Narcan has on someone overdosing if they're overdosing on heroin or cocaine or one of the other dozens of drugs that exist?
Yeah, Narcan would not help with certain drugs. Narcan will reverse the effects of an opiate overdose, but other drugs, it would not have any effect in that situation.
How long has it been around? Because I don't remember Narcan even 5 years ago being something that existed.
I know Narcan has been available for a long time. In fact, longer than we've had our recent opiate epidemic here. But it really came to the spotlight when so many communities really started dealing with this issue, and it became to the forefront. Narcan started to become more readily available as first responders and law enforcement agencies started to realize that we need to carry this with us to make sure we can respond to these types of incidents effectively. So it's been around a long time. It just really wasn't something that we needed to be concerned with here locally, because we didn't have, we didn't have an opiate epidemic. We didn't have this problem until recent years. But now, fortunately, we are all carrying it and all trained in how to use it.
Do you remember, Sheriff, when you first realized that there was a problem, that there wasn't just an isolated series of cases, that there was actually an issue?
I do. It was a number of years ago. Actually, this is a tough story for me, but the first opiate overdose death investigation that I was involved with was actually a childhood friend, somebody that I knew growing up, somebody who unfortunately had struggled with addiction, and it was the first death investigation I had. From that point, we started to see more and more similar cases, and it didn't take long for us to realize that, wait a minute, we've got a real problem here. And communities all over the state and all over the country started to see the same thing at the same time. Heroin was becoming very, very readily available. Opiates were becoming readily available. There were a lot of prescription pills out there, and we started to learn real quick here a number of years ago that we've got a real problem on our hands, and we still continue to battle that today.
Is that the first time you also recall realizing that it's not just the run-of-the-mill junkie, it's people that you see in Wegmans, people that you see out and about, people that you work with, people that you grew up with, that this is an issue that can affect anybody?
It can affect anybody, and I've seen it. It's affected people here locally from all walks of life. I don't care what type of demographic you come from. I've seen it affect all kinds in our community. So it doesn't single out any particular type or class of person. It can be anybody.
Let's talk about the relationship that exists between the Sheriff's Department and the Auburn Police Department. How do the two sides work together?
We have an incredible working relationship. In fact, I think it's as good now as it's ever been during my 21 years. I really enjoy working with the members of the Auburn Police Department. I have a great working relationship with Chief Sean Butler and Deputy Chief Anthony, as well as a number of people that are there at the Auburn Police Department. We do share resources. We have equipment that we share with them, and they share resources with us. And I think moving forward, we need to continue to work and share resources, work together and share those types of resources. I think it's good for our budgets, helps us both. But I think that we're both providing the best service we can when we partner with each other to do the work that we do.
You've been in the sheriff's office for 21 years. I wonder, in terms either of technology or different ways that crimes are investigated, what has been the biggest difference in law enforcement's approach from your first day to where we are right now?
I think that the biggest difference when it comes to technology is the availability of the different tools that we have that technology has given us. One big difference, when I came on the road in 1997, we hand wrote all of our reports. Anything we did was handwritten. Now we have mobile data terminals, or actually mobile computers, in each one of our cars. We can write reports and have instant access to all kinds of information right in our car that we didn't have access to before. We've seen an advance in all types of technology that helps us investigate crime. I spent the majority of my career in the Criminal Investigations Division, and during that time I've seen an increase in the availability of technology that helps us identify evidence, helps us identify perpetrators, and helps us put cases together that has really helped us be more efficient. It's helped us put better cases together and helped us identify offenders that we might not have otherwise.
With the advent of technology and more people's awareness of police procedure, do you think it's easier being a police officer now, or was it easier when you first took to the road in the late 1990s? Or is that something that's unanswerable almost?
That would be a tough question to answer. I think that when I came on in 1997, I faced many different challenges based on what we were dealing with at the time and the equipment and the types of things that we had then. I would say today we face many new challenges, and it can be very challenging. I wouldn't say that looking back that it was easier then. I think we just faced different issues, based on the time. So I wouldn't say that it could be easier or harder then versus today. I think that would be hard to answer.
Have you ever heard of the CSI effect?
I have.
For those who don't know what it is, it's the belief that crimes ought to be solved pretty darn fast in 45 minutes, and DNA is infallible and it can solve everything, and the legal system is just like that. It should be really, really simple. In reality, it's very difficult. Has that become one of the largest misconceptions of the day-to-day policeman's life when it comes to the public's view?
That's certainly created some challenges. Some of the TV shows that you're talking about, CSI and others, they'll show a murder plot and solve the crime in 1 hour, and they'll have all types of evidence, fingerprints, DNA, and other things.
Within seconds.
Within seconds. So I have had situations, unfortunately, where people that we've dealt with believe that we can do just that. I wish that we could. We would certainly be much more efficient. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of it, and investigations often take us quite some time. We don't always get fingerprints. We don't always get DNA when we're investigating a crime. We certainly hope that we can, if that will be helpful to us, but it's not like television, and it's not even close.
Do you wish it would be like television?
If we could do some of the things that they do on television, I think that would be quite awesome.
Although I imagine if that were the case, a lot of things would probably be considered unethical at the very least.
Possibly. I'm sure we would probably need a lot less staff if we could solve crimes as easily as they do on television.
Has social media made law enforcement easier? Has it made law enforcement more accessible to the general public? Or has it made it more difficult to do what you do?
I think that social media is a very positive thing for the law enforcement community. It has presented some challenges because now we see things such as bullying and that type of thing on social media, and it can be difficult to collect evidence based on things that were put out there on social media. However, we have had great success with social media, primarily Facebook, putting information out there, requesting the public's help for tips or any information. We've had some great success in solving cases by putting that information out there. I want to expand our social media presence moving forward. I think it's very important for the community to see what we're doing within the Sheriff's Department, not just for putting requests out there for tips and information, but I want to showcase the awesome work that the men and women of the Sheriff's Office do every day. Many people are very engaged with the community. They're volunteering and raising money for causes. And last Saturday, we held our 6th annual Shop with a Cop event. I love showcasing those things on social media and letting the community know what we're doing. I think that's important. So I want to expand our presence. I want to utilize some other platforms of social media that we're not currently using. So
like Snapchat
and Instagram and Twitter, and I'm not a pro at those. I've got a basic understanding, and I'm getting better every day. But I do.
That's where your kids help.
Exactly, they're good at it. They know how to use it. But
you deputize them.
That's a good idea. Maybe I can look at that.
See, I come to the table with some ideas.
Very nice. But to answer your question, I think social media has been a very positive addition to our toolbox.
You have a chance now, Sheriff, to look into the camera and tell the person watching this something. What would you want to tell them?
I think that I would just want to say I want to make sure that we have a sheriff's office that's approachable. I want to make sure that people are comfortable reaching out to me and the members of our sheriff's office if they need anything. As I said, you will see in the future that we are going to have a larger presence on social media, and I hope the web. I want to make it easier for people in our community to reach out to us if they need help in the law enforcement arena. And I also would like to let the public know that I want to see us move in a direction where we're working to support, especially with the drug epidemic, prevention and awareness efforts, and expand upon that when it comes to all crime. I want to work to prevent crime, not just solve crimes that have occurred. So it's important to me moving forward that we work on some of those initiatives, but more so important, I want the community to be able to let us know how we're doing and give us some feedback. So I want to make sure that we're approachable.
The Sheriff of Cayuga County, has that set in yet? Is it still weird to hear you referred to as Sheriff?
It is. I still see Sheriff Gould every day at the office, and it just kind of feels like he's still the sheriff. So I'm not sure if it's going to take coming in on January 1st for that to change, but it's coming here quickly, so I'll learn real fast. But it hasn't quite set in yet.
Brian, thanks very much, and hopefully we'll have another one of these conversations, preferably on the radio where these aren't, you don't have these hot lights on.
That's okay. Looking forward to it. This is great. Thank you, Joe. It was my pleasure.
That was the new Sheriff of Cayuga County, Brian Schenck. I'm Joe Salzone. Thanks for watching.